was a greater mood of optimism, actually, at the meeting today than I've seen for several years.
The way in which Mr. Blair has conducted himself in that office makes one want to cry.
The whole concept of the quartet was a sideshow. It was put there simply to keep everybody quiet while the usual business of doing nothing continued.
The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing.
The quartet, more than anything else, is an international umbrella, giving immunity to criminal policies on a daily basis. It's such an abomination. Things become even worse with military invasion. Then the soldiers do what they want at will. They can destroy your house, can demolish your shop, they can arrest you. You are not immune whether you are an old lady, a child, a toddler.
In many respects, the Middle East region should regard Israel not as an enemy, but as a model.
Without American weapons and money, Israeli aggression would have to stop, and a peaceful settlement might be possible.
The quartet eventually became just a place where people meet once every 6 to 9 months to say something that doesn't anger the Palestinians, doesn't anger the Israelis, and doesn't anger anybody. So it's become utterly useless.
Very early on, he named 6 projects that should be done. One of them was about sanitation in Gaza, which is a very, very serious crisis. Even that isn't done. So what is he doing?
One thing Blair did accomplish was a lucrative telecoms deal.
It's a $700 million investment over the next few years. It'll bring in revenues to the Palestinian Authority, about $300 million a year, so it's really, really important for the Palestinian Authority.
He said that he was on behalf of the Palestinians, but the fact is that one of the major bankers to that deal was his own bank, J.P. Morgan, something which was not disclosed at all at the time.
Tony Blair has very serious conflict of interest in which he is doing business during the term of his official duties.
In 8 years as peace envoy, Blair has visited the Middle East around 120 times. He visited Gaza just twice.
It's a grave disappointment for this man to turn out an opportunist in a cause that does not allow any more profiteering and making use of our tragedy.
Another contact from his prime ministerial days proved very rewarding to our globe-trotting peace envoy.
People thought that he was going as a representative of the quartet to discuss Middle East peace with the Emir of Kuwait. There was a clue, however, in the fact that he didn't take with him anybody from the rather well-staffed office of the quartet in Jerusalem, but instead he took with him the senior consultant for Tony Blair Associates, Jonathan Powell, the former chief of staff in Downing Street.
This is an extraordinary confusion of roles. Blair is going there on behalf of the world to seek Middle Eastern peace, but he's piggybacking on that role to pursue personal financial gain in the shape of Tony Blair Associates.
The alleged fee always seemed rather a lot for Blair's customary advice on economic reform.
Well, the figure that I heard was £27 million, I mean, that figure has never been convincingly argued with. I think Tony Blair has said the figure is wrong, but as usual, he doesn't offer us an alternative figure.
Basically, the Emir of Kuwait was boundlessly grateful to Mr. Blair for his role in the invasion of Iraq and the toppling of Saddam Hussein.
Certainly the Emir of Kuwait feels a certain sentimental attachment to Tony Blair because of the Iraq War. To him, Tony Blair was the man who rescued his regime and his country. And it may well be that he feels that if he is going to hire a consultancy firm, he should at the same time show his gratitude to Tony Blair. I have no idea whether that's the case or not, but it certainly doesn't seem a particularly good way to spend £27 million.
But it was his relationship with a rather better-known Arab dictator that started to eat away at the remains of Blair's credibility.
I'm sure a lot of the relationship that Blair was very keen to build with Gaddafi was financially motivated.
The Libyan sort of sovereign fund before the fall of Gaddafi was incredibly attractive to international bankers. They circled around it like bees round a honeypot.
He can go into a place like Libya and he can open the door to an $80 billion sovereign wealth fund and let JP Morgan swoop in and snatch and grab.
And there was huge commission for whoever could get hold of a portion of it and get it to their bank. You've got to ask the question, was he, at least in part on these missions to Libya, out to try and land himself that personal commission?
When Gaddafi was overthrown, $500 million of his dollars were stashed at JP Morgan. But Gaddafi had made demands of Blair too. The colonel's sponsorship of a French airline bombing in the 1980s now landed him a massive compensation bill from victims' families.
They demanded, I think, a sum of $1.5 billion as recompense to the families of the Americans who died in that attack. And it seems that Gaddafi put the squeeze on Blair to go and intercede with his old buddy George Bush to get this dropped.
At the end of his presidency, Bush passed a law preventing future compensation claims against Gaddafi.
It's extraordinary that Mr. Blair was lobbying George W. Bush on behalf of Colonel Gaddafi, all the more so because his lobbying had implications for British victims. Given that Mr. Blair had commercial interests in Libya, the affair is very difficult to explain in an honourable way.
But even worse was the discovery of documents indicating a blood-stained backstory to his waltz with Gaddafi. Extraordinary rendition.
And that's the legal term for what we as governments do. When we take a person against his or her will and we take them from one country to another without any legal process, it's called kidnapping. The mafia does a lot of it, so do the governments, unfortunately.
It's a process in which people are abducted, smuggled, taken in aircraft and ships to another country, while of course they're subjected to certain methods of questioning, which again is not subject to due process because again it gets in the way. It's much quicker just to beat it out of you.
Libyan dissident Abdul Hakim Belhaj is suing the British government. He has evidence that British and American secret services colluded in his extraordinary rendition.
اختطفت في مطار تايلاند في العاصمة بانكوك التي كانت في ظروف صحية غاية في الصعوبة حيث كانت حاملا لم تسلم ولم تنجو من التعرض لتعذيب.
جابوا السلسلة داروا لي في ايدي وعلقوني. قعدت يومين تقريبا، آخر يوم بيجوا يرفعوني، جابوا سرير حطوني فيه ولفوا علي كلي بالرجلي فوق وضربوني باري ما عرفت بتاع شنو. جا واحد ضربني بطني.
سبب تعاون الجهاز الأمن البريطاني والأمريكي لاقيت وتعرضت إلى تعذيب جسدي ونفسي أنا وزوجتي الحامل.
Belhaj was tortured in Abu Salim prison for 7 years. He was only released when Gaddafi was overthrown.
It became quite apparent that we had been involved, not just in the rendition, but also it was plain that we knew this was going on, that in some cases it looks as though we provided information to the questioners, the torturers, to put to the victims.
The Brits cut a deal with the CIA so that they provide the intelligence. The CIA swoops in and black bags him and his heavily pregnant wife.